Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 2025 meeting of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. My name is Kathy Welker, Chair of the Commission and representing Ward 5. Let's go around and see who else is here. Linda, do you want to start us off?
Hi, everyone. Linda Matthew. I'm also in Ward 5.
Bill O'Leary,
Jeremy?
Ward 2.
And Jeremy Hansen, also Ward 5.
Okay. And then also with us, we have Dylan from the city's Office of Resilience, Sustainability and Resilience. And I will note that we do not have a quorum at this time, so we're gonna kind of, we won't be approving minutes or making any decisions. Hopefully we have a couple more people joining us. So we're gonna skip the roll of the approval of the prior meeting minutes, unless anybody wants to just note, if they've had a chance to review it, any changes they'd like Dylan to make to them. I didn't see anything that needed changed.
I didn't see any changes needed.
No, worked for me.
Okay, great. All right, so tonight, thank you, Randy Rao, for joining us. Randy is a former chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission, and he's the CEO of Breaking Boundaries Environmental Organization. And wanted to invite him to come speak to us, especially as we're starting to dive into our priorities for the year and what some of the specific actions that we can take are. Would love to hear about his work, both with your organization and then work that you've done with the state too. Would be great. We have about 30 minutes set aside for this, so I want to turn it over to Randy to talk about his work, and then leave a few minutes for discussion too. So Randy, the floor is yours.
Well, I must say I feel right at home, being this though, I spent a lot of time working with this commission, and just want to say it definitely doesn't feel out of place right now. I feel like I'm at a family dinner that I haven't been to in a while. So that's good to be here, and I'm glad to see you all still putting forth the good effort to stay on top of these issues and these things. So as you know, BBE, Breaking Boundaries Environmental LLC, is a firm I started in 2022, and I started it as a direct result of the Maryland Conservation Act of 2022, and the main focus was to create environmental sustainability projects, green and blue infrastructure projects, with a particular focus around environmental justice and underserved communities, disadvantaged communities, and also working in agriculture, dealing in helping new beginner farmers obtain funding for farming and locations, and facilitating and farming production ideas and concepts, aligning resources, and that's both urban and rural. And at the state level, we've been actively engaging in several different roundtables around workforce development, environmental justice, sustainability, policy discussions around equity, around access to funding, procurement opportunities, and inclusion in the minority-owned environmental firms space. And I've been having some good success and making a lot of great partnerships, and continuing to work to get some of these environmental outcomes implemented, and it's been pretty great. I sit on the state commission, the Interstate Potomac River Basin Commission, and I also sit on the Maryland Department of Environment's Blue and Green Infrastructure Legislation and Policy Commission. And much like many other commissions in the space, we've been challenged with, the new administration and things that have to do with language and how things are framed and shaped and presented. So I'm sure you all can relate that it's been a bit of a challenge, but I think we're fit for the job and really trying to work our way through that new space. And we've been having a lot of success in the tree planting arena, doing large scale restoration projects in partnership with Replant Anne Arundel. And we've planted many, many trees. And we've been working and hiring people from reentry space. So that's been a really good, kind of equity lens, and always hiring people from the local area. So that's also a big plus. And we also have got a recent contract to perform a bioretention wetlands maintenance restoration at the Pitt Moyer Center. You get a chance, ride by there, check it out, and feel free to let us know what you think. And right now we're in the phase of that, which is phase 2, which deals with replanting the removed maintenance. And the maintenance hadn't been done on those spaces in 15 years. And so that was pretty interesting to go in there. And a lot of the spaces, you'll find that when you install watershed gardens and different biodiversity swales and things like that, if you don't provide regular maintenance, when you come back later, it becomes more costly, And so regular maintenance is much more cheaper than waiting a long time and having to do a large amount at once. So, and we also have been working with the Chesapeake Bay Trust community-based organizations capacity building initiative. And we've been working with anywhere around 10 to 14 different organizations of color that are servicing communities of color and helping them submit one grant, which they would be provided a TA from the Chesapeake Bay Trust, technical assistance. And so that's been pretty successful. We have a workshop coming up, a couple trainings. And so right now we are helping these organizations build their capacity and readiness to submit for an environmental stewardship grant. So seeing how their missions may align with the missions of some of the grants programs, and really helping them come up with those conceptual ideas and plans. And that's been pretty good too. So locally, we've been kind of leading this high impact community-based environmental project programs, and especially in historically underserved neighborhoods. We had a meeting recently also about some trash removal projects throughout the city and the county, and planting trees, working with residents, helping them understand how to bring value to their land space. We also have been working closely with the African American Descendant Communities Coalition, along with the co-chair, Keisha, Monique. And that's been interesting because a lot of the people that own property don't necessarily understand the environmental literacy components and have value or programs or opportunities that may exist in their at their reach. And that's where we come in and try to help out with that. So I would say a few ways that the commission could maybe assist in some of these instrumental ways is creating targeted grant or loan programs for small equity-focused environmental organizations, and maybe coming up with list sharing of where these opportunities exist, so that not only can we advocate for equity in the business sector, but not just the low-paying possible labor jobs, but also entrepreneurship, so that people can feel like they can grow and be able to put forth their own activities. And so another way would be maybe coming up with tips to simplify procurement pathways, or even working with developers throughout the city and the county. I'll give you an example. For the trash removal project that we were looking at in the Robinwood community, we were told that, it's not really something that they're willing to invest right now, and because most of some of those communities are up for redevelopment. And so my thing was, even in that phase, I think there still should be something done that way, it doesn't look like it's just something that's completely unprioritized. So we're looking at grant funding and things like that, which they're in full support of through, letters of support for going for grant funding to fix some of those challenges. So making a way for developers to work directly with local firms that have kind of a boots on the ground and an ear to the street to the local community that they'll be working in is a big plus, as well as imparting parts in their developers' plans to work with social equity programming and ways to engage with citizens that can keep them feeling a part of the community before they leave and then after the redevelopment is done and when they come back. And so even if it's like, having them have a brick or something that they sign that they take with them when they leave, or some type of, installation that makes them feel a sense of belonging. That's a big thing. I was the director at the Boys and Girls Club when they reopened and they redesigned the Annapolis Gardens community. And so that's pretty familiar for me. And, just ensuring that there practitioners integrated into the planning and policy decision making for some of the environmental Chesapeake Bay program, different different types of ideas, and even like the University of Maryland Department's Environmental Finance Center, involving them in the discussion and seeing ways to align some of these opportunities. So that's pretty much it. We also been working with the whole Watershed Act and the Resilience Authority. We have we're awarded a qualified vendor for the Resilience Authority, so we are approved to work in program development services for Resilience Authority for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. And so through that, we've been looking at different projects, like a project in Galesville, and some other things. So, it's also a trails project that we've been working with, that we have a grant from National Park Services to work with. It's called the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Space Grant. And we're trying to renew some of these trails that have been back here in this community for over 200 years. And really served as a highway from one community to another in the midst of segregation. And it was pretty impactful. And so we want to restore that space and use that as a means to allow for access to water and nature for this community and many other communities. So that's pretty much my rundown, where I'm at today. As you know, I previously worked with Jeremy at the Chesapeake Research Consortium, where I worked for 3 years, and now I'm kind of stepping off into my own firm full time, and of course that's always can be a challenge. So any input and resources and opportunities that you all may see that we can partner on and help each other, definitely offer that.
Well, thank you. I knew you were doing a lot, but you were doing a lot more than I was aware of, for sure. Yeah, you sound like you're really busy. Questions for Randy, or thoughts or comments? Because you've presented some interesting ideas for us to think about. I know one of our goals this year is to find a way to be you talk about like environmental literacy, more educational, see if there's a way that we can support educational opportunities, letting people know what sort of opportunities are out there and what's going on in the community, that they may want to participate in. So Jeremy or Bill or Linda, thoughts?
Hi there. I just, I don't know if it's a question, but as far as you mentioned Robinwood and the trash cleanup, have you, instead of paying somebody to come in and do that, have you considered the community involvement? That get them to rally around it and, you know,
Actually, I have a comment on that. So this Saturday, I'm leading the Greenscape group for Robinwood, and we're going to be cleaning up that traffic circle at the end of Robinwood, planting a bunch of flowers and shrubs and a tree. But we're also going to be doing a lot of trash cleanup on Saturday morning as well
Hmm.
in Robinwood.
And Bill, can you remind me what time that is, please?
We meet at 9.
At 9. And how long do you expect it to go?
Well, they have on the website that it'll be from 9 to 11. And I think it depends on how many volunteers I get as to when we finish.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can make it. My schedule's been kind of up in the air, but I plan on attending. So maybe
Great.
you can let me know later about like where to park and that kind of stuff. So that'd be great.
Okay.
you can probably walk over there.
I probably could. And I don't know. If I'm going to be doing a lot of work, I might have to save my energy for doing the work.
Yeah.
rather than walking. But anyway, yeah. So
So,
Randy.
Yeah, so typically we don't, one of the best practices around environmental restoration and green and blue infrastructure projects, such trash cleanups in communities of color or underserved communities, is actually not to have them completely just volunteer. The better exchange is where they get a little bit of education around why it's important to not throw your litter and trash. As well as even helping them economically, whether it's through a stipend or gift cards or some type of thing that shows them that they want to be incentivized for this type of work. And that's a best practice right now in these spaces. So what we were thinking was going for some type of grant so that we could do some of that community engagement work along with the trash cleanup project and hiring contractors that look like the community and that are also from the local community, which is also a best practice. When we did the Annapolis Gardens project, we hired people that were actually living from that community. So when the children and the youth saw them out there working, they kind of already knew who they were. They kind of, were very receptive to, hey, what are y'all doing over here? And then that gives an opportunity for them to explain what they're doing and the greatness and the relieving aspect of that. I have talked to Jared about that project because I wasn't aware of it, and I was already kind of looking at that spot to try to figure out what we can do about it. So that's great. I feel like it's getting done. So that's awesome. If there's any other things that need to be done there when you all are done, feel free to reach out so we can try to see how we can get another, maybe a phase 2 project in there that deals with some of those things. Maybe put a little bench up or put some mulch down and, clear a lot of those invasives back there, because trash and the way communities look and has direct links to crime and, people, and there has been a very much an uptick of gun violence and shootings in that community. And so, that and working with the community as well, which I think Jared understands. I'm not sure what or who in the community he's working with on that project, but if you need to know community liaisons that you can work with that are from that community, let me know and I can try to, deploy some of them to work with you on Saturday. I have an event on Saturday as well, so I actually won't be there at that event, but I did hear about it.
If you can send me additional contacts, I know it's very late in the game, but happy to have people. I had some difficulty getting in touch with some of the names that Jared provided. So if you know of people in the community, I agree with you. I think that's super important. Then please pass them on. The other thing, when you were speaking of a phase 2, I did speak at length with Ellen Moyer, and she had a good suggestion about getting. She says she may have some grant money that could be directed to Robinwood, and while it wasn't on the city's list of available plants to order, I think it would be wonderful to have a vegetable garden in Robinwood that people would be able to tend and then, literally get something out of it.
Yeah,
And so
that's a mhm.
I think there's a fair amount of open space in the neighborhood, and I don't know if we have to talk to the Haka folks or how that works, but about identifying a spot. But I feel like there's the potential to have a community garden, whatever you want to call it, in that area.
Well, if you're looking for Hacker to support it, it's they have a project like that in Harbor House right now with Heaven White, and she's one of my colleagues, and she has a great, huge, not I won't say huge, but it's a pretty nice size vegetable garden right there in Harbor House, and that'd be a good pilot to look at how she's doing it, maybe pump some funds there and look at rebranding it to Robinwood, where she's the one who is leading kind of the charge and connecting with residents, mainly because she already knows them. And she has a existing trusting relationship with those residents.
That'd be
And
great.
that's a big part of it. Even like myself, I grew up in that area since I was a little kid, and so a lot of the people around there know me, familiar face, and it's always good to see a familiar face when you're, coming into a somewhat of a new community.
Right. And you also mentioned invasives for the wood line towards the back of the property. I don't know if we're going to get to that on Saturday, but that is another potential project that we could work on. Those woods could use some cleanup and some ivy and other invasive removal.
Yeah, it'd be a great opportunity as well to get some, young adults out there and get them geared up with some invasive tools and proper gear and show them how it's done. Like I said, a big part of my work and why I created this business was because I realized that, being able to engage with audiences and get them to see the benefits of doing it with an expert and being shown, that's a great activity, and not always does it happen like that in some of our community, but definitely a great opportunity there.
Thanks for that info, Randy.
Yeah, and we can talk offline, Bill, if you want, and we can exchange and chat about that project, and even for the next project or next project. I know that Jared has some goals in mind for his potential run and for the mayor's office, and I know Ellen Moyer. We worked her and her team, in the past, and very similar sentiments around environmental stewardship. And we actually did a tree planting project in Robinwood some years back on Earth Day, and in partnership with the Moyer, Ellen Moyer. And the mayor came out. It was nice, but yeah. And is Replant Annapolis? Is that still a thing? Is that still going on, or is that just kind of slowed up some?
I believe that's an initiative through the city forester. I can definitely check onto what's going on there, but I don't have any present information as to that program.
Is that part of the Watershed Stewards program? I'm trying
Yeah,
to
yep.
remember because I'm taking their academy right now, and I know they have several programs, and so I haven't gotten
Yeah.
them all straight, but that rings a bell. I think
Okay.
it might be
Yeah,
which is
I'm a class 7 graduate.
oh,
Yeah.
congratulations! I'm class
So
17. I'm class
yeah.
17, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had 3 capstone projects when I was there instead of 1. I was a little overzealous and yeah,
I'm
so that
not
was
surprised to hear that somehow.
it
You
was
don't
fun. It
stand
was a
still.
wonderful time. Yeah,
Where where
I've
were
been
your
referring
projects?
people there too. One was at Asbury Broadneck United Methodist Church, which is my church that I was Christianed in 1980. And it was for $560,000. It was the largest amount ever awarded in the state of Maryland for an environmental restoration on a historic African American church site. And that was called the Ephemeral Channel Restoration, Cemetery Restoration. And they had flooding in their cemetery due to a new development upstream that was put in by the county, and the county refused to kind of, assist with some of that development. So they contacted me, and we put together some partners with the Alliance of Chesapeake Bay and WSA and a few others, and we put in for that funding and got awarded. And if you want to visit, it's a great project. It's we've done invasive species removal there as well, training for the WSA Academy program. And we also have done more tree planting projects there. We've planted over almost 1,000 trees on that property. And even recently, we just planted 36 trees there last month.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I'd love to see it.
And the goal is to, now see if we can find some grant funding to pay to have some kind of component where we can train and work with the youth from the summer camp so that they can learn from some of the sites it has to offer.
I was wondering when you mentioned like targeted grant programs, but then you also mentioned like a list share of where like opportunities are. You mean like funding opportunities?
Yeah, but not just only funding opportunities, but also business operational opportunities, like such as a small business development center of Maryland. Uh, they offer a lot of resources around business development, business plan, logo, assist with, projections, you know, website assistance, and it's very helpful. And also small business grants or things like that, different offices may help with.
I know we've been talking a little bit about how we can get information out to the community, and we haven't gotten very far yet. We have the Facebook page, which has not been super active. We've got to take some media training that Dylan's working on, and so not that we have a ton of people coming to Facebook, and I know there are a lot of other platforms, but just as we brainstorm how we can, be a vehicle for getting information out to the community, you think of something.
Yeah,
I'd
so
love to, yeah.
yeah. It's a new world we live in. But yeah, I got some ideas. I got some strategies, and they've proven to be successful, I think. And so yeah, we could definitely talk about that.
Okay. And I know one of the things we were just going to is in our updates section is we have we have one opening on this commission, and we have another person who's not going to continue in their role after June. And so, we have like 3 of us from Ward 5, and there are definitely gaps in wards that are represented on the commission. And so I know we're going to work with like the city council, the alder people from those wards. They have newsletters to try to, generate some interest in maybe getting, more of a spread across the wards on this commission.
Totally know all about that.
Yeah, we've been there. Yeah, I know there are very
Yes.
few new ideas, right?
I have a few people I can think of, though. I will say Heaven White is someone you may want to look up. You may can find her on Facebook. She's from the Eastport area. But I know she would be definitely a great fit, I think.
Did you say Hannah or Heather?
Heaven White.
Oh, Heaven. Okay, that's a pretty name.
I'll try to connect you all in an email.
And is that the same person you mentioned earlier with the vegetable garden?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
And another one is Rita. I can't remember her name. I think it's Rita Porter. To look that up.
Okay. Other questions or thoughts?
Rita Dorsey. I'm
Oh.
sorry. Rita Dorsey.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, that was it. So right now, I'm curious to know where you are now in your commission process or phases, or are you all reviewing priorities right now, or are you guys, doing happy hour, chewing chats now, or what's new? Anything exciting, or I know Bill and Jeremy were on when I was on. So any new updates, anything interesting?
I think we've been talking about meeting in person again, at least once or twice this year. So that'd be interesting. It's been a while, as you know.
Yes. Yeah, I threw on that chew and chat. Yeah. But that'd be good. And there's a lot going on right now in the political space and the legislation space around environmental isms and restoration and funding and things like that, especially with the tariffs, which do kind of affect the environmental industry in a way. And so it's been a very vulnerable space in the business sector. I will say that, and I know that others can probably agree. And so right now, I think that, what the best thing that can be done right now is talking about what's going on and being very vocal about, what you're experiencing and what you're seeing and hearing out in the community around what the challenges and needs are. So you all's ability to put your ear to the street right now, almost kind of like reporters, like a news reporter almost, kind of like Sherlock Holmes had, and your ability to put people in front of audiences like this that allow people to be heard and tell their story. That's probably the best thing going on, because that's what's not happening the most, and I feel like that's something that's very important. And people, silence can be complicit, and so we need people that can champion our voices that are in positions where people can hear them. And a lot of times that doesn't always have to be from someone that looks like you, and crossing those cultural barriers, I think, is the biggest elephant in the room at times when it comes to what some of the challenges and needs are, and being able to advocate for those that don't have a voice. And I talk about this a lot with the funding that comes through federal funding and all these millions of dollars. And no one really thinks about, okay, well, let's try to divert some of this funding and allocate it into some of the spaces that have gotten the least amount of funding. And when you talk about infrastructure, the beautiful, nightmare of infrastructure development is that if you are not at the table advocating for your community, you will not be able to affect change. You will not be able to afford the luxury of being able to fund large projects, BMPs. I have this obsession with wanting to start some type of BMP in some underserved community because there aren't many. And, that's a big challenge. I feel like, we should be trying to do some of that work. So, yeah, so just, you all's ability to, kind of control the narrative, and you have that power to do that, to be able to say, okay, well, we'll have this person on or that person on that's going to talk about this or that, and may expose or talk about things that may not be the normal convo. But there will be some things that all can be learned from that. So the non-typical spaces of the environmental sector, which and sometimes include the private public partnership, as we call the P3. And so.
Do you have suggestions for, who you think would be great for us to hear from, to listen to?
So there's a guy named Alex Smith. He's the owner of Division Street. Division Street. Can't remember the last part of it. Division Street Outdoor Contracting. Another one would be a gentleman named Stanford Womack, and he's the CEO of Womack Construction. Another organization would be Blacks in Marine Science. They're doing a lot. BIMS. They're making a lot of great success locally. And let me think about that. I'll try to maybe do a little list, because I could give you a long list. Yeah, because these are all people that I pretty much work with and or know about them. So, and that's good. It's good to be able to expand, like you said, like getting a broader audience to your meetings takes a specific action of someone going in a different space to advertise and to share and say, hey, here's here's the link, come here and talk about this. Otherwise you'll just keep getting the same audiences to your meetings. And that was something that I was always trying to push for, is a lot more different audiences getting at the table here, because it's important, and it's always good to hear from others.
Yeah, no, I think that is a very good point, a very true point.
So a Facebook group. So when you have your monthly meetings, I don't know if any of you all know anyone that could create a little flyer for you, but you should create a flyer with a hyperlink on it that would take you directly to the Zoom link or whatever, and say, please come. We're looking for 2 new commissioners, and we, please come if you're interested. And there are groups that you can share that flyer in, like the Eastport neighborhood community, or it's another group called the Other Annapolis, or the caucus. Yep, the caucus of Anne Arundel County, Black Caucus, just different groups, and these groups pages are where you can do a lot of advertising that, and it'll go pretty broadly versus trying to pinpoint individual persons' pages. If you go to groups pages that have a lot of viewers, you'll get more visual like that.
That's good. Thank you.
And maybe the commission needs a social media page, the AEC needs an Instagram page, just to share flyers, or to share, hey, here's the link, because like Jeremy was saying, it's a changing world, and people are using many different avenues to interact right about now versus the old typical ways of just email. Even email sometimes for some people is a lot.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I
yeah,
know.
yeah. So
Um, well, yeah, so Dylan, I guess we'll get that media training done and then we can figure out, how we can use those platforms. That would be great. So, all right. Well, thank you, Randy. I'm so glad that
yeah.
you could join us.
Yes, yes, and keep an eye on the AI because AI is definitely, something that's growing. Right now, we are working on AI training programs for public housing, low-income community residents, so that they can become the next generation of programmers for AI. And we're getting ahead on that now. And there's a lot of things that AI is good for, especially in the grant writing space and proposal writing space, or even design space for environmental projects. A lot of things can be used there if y'all are probably aware of that as well. But being in tune with the cutting edge technology is always a good move in the environmental
Oh,
space.
yeah, that's great.
I'm gonna jump
Well, I'm
off.
glad we had huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna jump off if you all want to carry on with you all's meeting.
So I'm glad we had a chance to connect and found some opportunities to, work together going forward. So look to continue the conversation.
Yes. Yes, this was good. Good to see you all.
Great to
Thanks,
see you,
Randy.
man. Have a good night.
All right. Take
Thanks so
care.
much,
All
Randy.
Thanks.
right, good to
Okay.
see you, Bill. Peace.
All right. So that following that was our implementing the AEC 2025 priorities. So I did send out a cleaned up version to you all via email, I think early last week. I did add a few bullets to try to capture what Paul had brought up, like the social justice angle he was talking about, or environmental justice angle he was talking about. So I'd hope to hear from him, like, does that capture at a high level the kinds of things that you were talking about? So I feel like we have not actually voted on them, but we can do that by email. And so we'll follow up after this meeting to do an email vote on that. But the discussion I had hoped to have tonight was to dive into like one of the priorities and really start to think through like what are some of those concrete actions that we can start taking. Randy gave some great ideas that I'd love to be able to follow up on too. But would you rather like push this discussion to our in-person meeting next time when more of us are here, or go ahead, or if you all have some ideas you'd like to talk about in one of those priorities, we could go ahead and have some discussion on that.
Honestly, just don't have much else to say about the priorities at this point. I think we're ready to approve them by email since we don't have quorum tonight.
Okay. So we can do that. We can do the vote via email. But at the next meeting, I would like to, and maybe we can just talk for a minute about which one you all would like to tackle first. I'd really like to kind of work through these and identify some specific actions. So any thoughts on which one you'd like to tackle first, or we can decide at next month's meeting? Hopefully we'll have a full contingent.
Yeah, I know the mayor proposed this budget, right? I have not like looked into anything to see like where things are standing right now, especially with respect to like I'd be curious to check on the forester's budget and see how that's doing, for example, as well as some of the other programs we have talked about in the last year or so. that would maybe be the signal about what our priorities would be come next month. But though I'm not, though I forget the exact timeline as far as the city budget and adoption goes, and if we can deliver something relevant and timely.
Dylan, what's with the budget? Because when does that have to be approved by? They do that by, is it a July 1st start on the city budget?
It is a July 1st start. You know, I can't say if there's an official deadline before that. It's a good question. It's safe to say before July 1st. But I can get some more information as to the typical deadline for getting that approved.
And how can we find out, like, what Jeremy, help me with the language here, what the priorities are in the budget, so that when we meet in May, we would have an idea what those things are. We wouldn't still be asking, well, what are they talking about doing, right? So how do we get that information?
Can you repeat the question?
So how do we know what the budget priorities are, like what they're talking about? What are they? What are those discussions that the city council is having?
Yeah, I would just follow what city council is speaking about at their meetings. You can check the website, pay attention to the meetings. The budget was introduced on April 14th. It might be available online. Let me double check. But yeah, just following those meetings, just keeping an eye out for when those are scheduled to be talked about. It's probably the best way to move forward with that. It does seem like the final date is June 30th. I mean, I would have figured a little bit before that. Yeah, I mean, I can find those exact meeting dates for you, and get you any documentation that you might want.
Okay, and then I assume that there are minutes we can review too. We can find those online, right? Minutes from the city council meetings. So there could be info in those too, or are those pretty high level?
Yeah, I'm sure, they're pretty basic minutes. Yeah, I'm sure I can find this somewhere as well.
And maybe we can see if that's going to be our topic of discussion for us in May. If Councilman Savage or Alderman Savage can be there, and then Alderman Huntley from Ward 1. He's on the finance committee, so he's also pretty plugged into the overall budget and has an environmental mindset as well. So if one or both of them can give us some of their time, that could be very productive for us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do you think one or the other or both? If we need both of them, what would be the most productive way to?
If both are there, that would
That'd
be
be great.
ideal. But
Okay.
if we'll take what we can get. It's my thought. But I also need to go back to the news. They both put out newsletters, so they're also source of information for me that I'm going to be going back to about the budget, aside from just the videos. So if
Are those online, or can you forward the newsletters to the group?
Yeah, if there's anything relevant, I'll forward them. But I know I know Alderman Huntley talks about the budget. I'm not sure if he gets into anything about, but I can also forward it and then you can sign up for it. So either way, I'll do that now.
Yeah, just that there are any past. Well, I guess it might like us to past ones, but if you see something, if you could just forward them. But yeah, I hope to look at those, getting those newsletters.
It looks like the next budget discussion will be at Finance Committee, unless it already happened. Let me double check. So I'm just reading right now. It says So yeah, the mayor introduced the budget on the 14th, and the finance committee will review and make recommendations. And it'll take place over several weeks in multiple committee meetings, and those will be broadcasted. I'm not sure if the first one has happened yet. It could have, because the finance committee meets on the first and second Wednesdays, and we've already had second Wednesday, which did happen after the mayor released the budget. So I will check the meeting from last week. And then from there, there's seems like some internal review. Then I believe it goes to city council, and then I think there's some meetings there, and then it's approved, more or less.
I imagine the budget's a lot to wade through. Are they?
Yeah, it's consistently a pretty large document. I know that Jackie is pretty, just about every director in the department is fairly well aware of what's going on with the budget. So I can ask her to just keep an eye onto, when environmental projects and different things like that are being pinned for the budget, whether it be operating or capital. And either she can give you updates or she can let me know, and I can provide you guys some insight as to what's going on and where.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, like, the other commissions and boards, like, do they get like any kind of summary of budget stuff that's relevant to their area of work, or everybody just sort of has to pick through and pick out what's meaningful to the topic that they work on?
Yeah, I would say it's the latter.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
not all the commissions are like
Right.
advisory in the same way we are, right? Like the planning commission isn't gonna make commentary on the budget, I imagine. But that's part of our role, so.
As it has to do with environmental projects then. So, okay. I also think, though, that as we look at the priorities for actions that we can take, it's not all going to be tied to the budget too, right? There are things that we want to do that are independent of whatever the budget is. So, and you think about a year seems like a long time, but really it's like, just a handful of meetings, right? And so I'm looking at this as kind of, and since our priorities haven't changed a lot over time, looking at this kind of longer term, definitely, with some maybe short-term actions and then longer term things that we want to try to achieve too in each of these areas. Because I don't think that our role is only to advise the council, right? There's the public education part too that's in code. All right, so I guess for those of us that are here, and we'll write a note to everybody to, if they have time, get a little bit smart on what's coming out on the budget. And then we will have a more specific conversation about the priorities at the next meeting. And Dylan, would you extend, or do I extend an invitation to Alderman Savage and Huntley to join us?
You're certainly, welcome to invite them yourself as the chair. I think it would probably be more appropriate, but if you would like me to take care of it, then I'm willing to do that.
I will do that, but would like your support I think next, because I know they're very busy.
Yeah.
And so I think that like your Jackie's follow-up last time was, really instrumental in getting Alderman Savage to join us. So
Sure.
maybe a team effort that I'll get the ball rolling.
Yeah, just feel free to CC me, and
Okay.
if I don't respond within a certain amount of time, then yeah, I'd be happy to follow up.
Okay, great. Okay. So that we're down to the solar park briefing. So Dylan, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know that the firm that is doing the pollinator work there briefed the Environmental Matters Committee, and Jackie did send out his PowerPoint. But I know, and Alicia's the one who thought of this, she was interested in particularly like a briefing about the project in general and where things are. But if you could just, give that to us, and we'll pass the information along to her.
Yeah, definitely. So we got a draft design from LWLA, the landscaping consultant group that that we've contracted with. And actually, I can pull it up and just share my screen here, just as a visual aid. Just give me one quick second. Okay. Can you see my screen? You can. Okay. Right. So they provided us with this design, and just provide some context. We've kind of been doing a lot of back and forth with LWLA. They've been really great in terms of working with us, coordinating with Novus Renewables, who are currently managing the solar panels on the property, and trying to make everything work with all the delicate ins and outs of this property. I think I've described a little bit before, but this property is a former landfill. It was the first solar field on a landfill on non-federal land in the United States. So, it's from the start been a fairly innovative property. There are some nuances that go into how it was enabled to be a solar field in the first place. So, we wanted to add as much native pollinator habitat as possible. But some of the biggest concerns is surrounding that membrane that's over that landfill, and then the soil cap that's over that membrane. And there's obviously quite a decent amount of steep slope around that, and so that makes planting things difficult. So we've done a lot of back and forth with DPW, who are managing the stormwater basins around it, and just trying to ensure that everything is up to a certain standard. And so after a lot of that deliberation, what you see in green, including this lighter green over here, is the plantable area that we agreed upon. And so it consists of approximately 20 acres over that entire extent. And it's mostly surrounding the solar panels themselves. Now what you see in this lighter green over here is inside the fenced area on which the property that Novus Renewables is managing / leasing. They have not agreed, they've not provided a strong commitment to that area. We are still working to get that sort of commitment from them. So this is still, of course, the draft design and a work in progress, but we're hoping that Novus Renewables is able to make it work between different maintenance schedules and different things that are going to go into making this project work. So in this proposal that LWLA had given us, the kind of talked a little bit about the existing conditions, sort of site preparation is going to be necessary, installation, maintenance, how they're going to seed it, the schedule, and different things like that. So, in terms of the existing conditions, it kind of went into the soil and different types of material that you're going to find throughout here. We're talking here a little bit about some riprap you might find, kind of talking a little bit about the stormwater constructions that are around. And so there's this large basin here and some other related things that you'll see around the property. And this kind of just goes into the site preparation. So this may change as to which specific year it'll fall under, just surrounding some other projects that are going around the area that may conflict with the installation of the pollinator habitat. But effectively, the first year, we're talking about doing some spraying and some mowing, and then also doing some herbicide, and controlled sprays here and there. And it kind of goes on, kind of developing, how they're going to, remove what's not necessary or not wanted in that area, to provide, sort of the way for the more beneficial species to be implemented and established. And some of that may require matting in those more sensitive, slightly more sloped areas. And like I said, they're trying to do spotted sprays and not just general sprays. Because obviously we don't want to disturb the natural aspects of the area. We'd like to reduce that as much as possible, but it may be necessary in certain areas. So here it kind of talks about the different seed mixes that would be found inside of the fence and the outside of the fence, which is the area that we manage. So we can zoom in here just a little bit. You might be familiar with some of these things like butterfly weed, asters, partridge pea, tick seed, and X, Y, and Z. And then just a little bit more found outside the fence, just because there's more area and a little bit more nuances to the soil and the conditions out there. And then in that large basin, it has its own seed mix as well. And so you can really see here just how much experience that this firm has working with these sorts of conditions. And it's not only just, the soil conditions, the slope, all those different things that are going into this. This firm actually does have experience working over landfills in the past as well. And that's one of the main pieces of experience that we were attracted to when we received their proposal. It's not common that jurisdictions try to establish pollinator habitat over former landfills. And so that experience is proving to be very beneficial in this area. And so they provided just some, sort of rough images, example images as to, how things would be phased. And we would like to include some outreach materials at the site, while the project is ongoing, just so, when people are coming up to the solar park, that they understand, this is part of a phased implementation. So this is what it would look like after it's prepped, like I was saying, talking about mowing, talking about doing some controlled sprays, and different things like that. And then, first grow really doesn't look like much. Second grow, third, and then this is what eventually it looks like as a mature meadow. I think a lot of people expect meadows to, pop right up, and look like a perfect garden right away. But that's sort of the thing with perennials. is that they can take a while to establish. Not all of its perennials, of course, but throughout the entire extent of the field, it will take 3-ish years for it to really look like a proper meadow. And this is just more of the types of species that we would see throughout the solar park. And so they kind of just continue to provide some detail as to what's currently there and what they believe what sort of complications could arise if they were to do certain things another way, and why they chose to do the sort of implementation that they did choose. We understand that there's already a significant amount of vegetation there. And so because of the vegetation that's currently there and its lack of conflicts with the membrane that exists, we feel fairly confident that the new plant species will not conflict with the membrane over the landfill. But we have actually done a small side contract with the firm for them to just do a little bit of more research into what went into their previous landfill project, what are the current conditions of the roots, of the existing vegetation at the landfill, and what they expect the root conditions to be like after the establishment of the meadow, just to make sure and really provide stronger confidence that this will be nothing but a net benefit to the area, and that there's not going to be any conflicts in the future with anything. I'm sure they could have explained all that more eloquently than I did. But that's effectively kind of how we've been working on the project over time, and that's the sort of progress that they've come back to us with. So yeah, I can try to answer your questions as much as possible. But yeah, we're really pleased with the progress that they've gotten back to us so far. Like I said, some things are still in the works, still contingent. But we're feeling pretty good about the project so far.
Yeah, the photos are lovely. I look forward to when we have our own meadow. So long term, how does like an evaluation of how healthy it is, how it's contributing to supporting the ecosystem and strengthening the ecosystem? What kind of how do you evaluate those sorts of things over the longer term?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would definitely say it's more of a question about comparing the before and after and keeping stock of what's available. So when we were, originally working on just, accepting proposals and working with firms to get sort of like a concept, we were taking stock of what was already there. And LWLA took that stock and said, we think that we can remove these things and then provide these different plant species to provide a net benefit to the area. And so by monitoring the situation and seeing, we've only seen, X% reintroduction of this, invasive species. And we've seen, a percent coverage of, these beneficial species that we planted. That would probably be the way to move forward to understand, how successful the reintroduction of native species was. So just kind of comparing the before and after in terms of data, based on the stock that was already done, and then continuing to check on the stock afterwards.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Jeremy and Linda, any questions or thoughts?
No, Wish I had more to add, but yeah, I think it's pretty well explained, Dylan. So thank you. And yeah, I've been wondering, like as you're going through the seed mixes, I'm like, um, I guess in my mind I was imagining like planting landscape plugs or something, but the seed mix approach really does make a lot more sense as far as an actual meadow and not just a landscape. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, and at some point we had considered doing some plugs just to beautify it a little bit, during the first or 2 years of growth, just because we do anticipate that some people might go up to the park and say, "Oh, this used to be beautiful and lush, and now it's all barren. What happened?" Um, and we may still end up, using some budget for that, but really the number one thing is just that it's a less natural process, but it's also a more expensive process to put in those plugs. And so right now we're pretty, I would say, fairly under budget. And in the end, we may have, um, the maintenance budget already within the CIP for the next 10 or so years. So we're really trying to be as frugal as possible with the installation of this. So, it's TBD as to, if we would also include plugs at some point. But it's something we have talked about with the firm, just because of those aesthetic concerns that we were talking about. Yeah.
Linda, anything?
I think it looks beautiful, and if it is sustainable, do you need to go out and pull weeds or anything like that, or does nature take care of itself in a meadow?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think weeds and invasive species are always going to be an issue. And so kind of what I was getting at with, you know, maintenance costs, we already have built-in maintenance costs, um, for the solar park, and so does Novus Renewables inside the fenced area. Um, it may be that, we're going to have to do a little bit of increased maintenance, just to make sure that in the next 5 to 10 years that that's happening as minimal as possible. However, Novus Renewables, or not, no, sorry, excuse me, LWLA is working to ensure that not only is there a full eradication of those invasive species, but the species that are going to be put in instead, will be fairly resilient, and will be frankly packed in a way that will limit the amount of space for those invasive species and those weeds to come in and take up their space. But one of the number one issues, frankly, is just that there is a fence, and where you have fences, you have birds, and different species that are bringing in also different species that will drop it along those lines, and it's hard to establish vegetation, right at the fence base. But over time, invasive species that are being dropped right there could establish, right? So there are some constraints with how, nature works, like you were getting at, and with the infrastructure that exists there. So it's a matter of monitoring and being prepared and knowing what to look for, and responding appropriately in issues if issues arise.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. We appreciate the update.
Of course.
Let's move on to the planning and zoning update, which we thank you to Jackie and Dylan for sending that out. So we have that this month. I know they talked about it also at the Environmental Matters Committee meeting. I watched the video of the meeting, and I thought that discussion around AutoZone was really interesting, actually, because Eric Lashinsky, the head of planning, he has actually talked with them in their discussions about connecting to that walking biking trail and creating, I think, between the street and their parking lot, some habitat, kind of a habitat area, with some natives or something like that. So I thought it was really great that the planners are talking to developers as they're working on bringing a new property online on some of these environmental things. And Dylan, if you were at the meeting, maybe you can talk about that a little bit more. That was kind of rough what I just said, but I was, I know that was one of the things that Jenny had talked about a while ago, and that we have in our priorities is like, is there, how is that? How are those environmental things being brought up in these developments at an early stage, so that we can see some progress in the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there in person, but I was able to chime in, or sorry, listen in when Mike Meekins was presenting this. I can't speak as to, kind of how that process is, developed, or is sort of continued during the development phases. But I do know that there are different stakeholders at several different points that do have, those environmental, items that they seek to review in the environmental lens that they try to apply. But in terms of, how these developments are shaping up to what residents in this commission want to see, I don't think there's any real proper standard, if that makes any sense. So that is sort of why we were hoping to be able to get this list to you, for you to review. And if you feel as though, that there's a project ongoing that, you either, you're seeing in person, and you're concerned about something, or, based on the description status that's found within these descriptions, you can raise a concern or make a question to pass along to DPZ, or for the commission to bring up within themselves. But you'll see that the commission does provide its opinions, and sometimes those are related to the environment. So yeah, if you have any concerns or questions about some of these developments, then yeah, this would be the time.
Yeah, because that is just a very high level summary. So I was kind of wondering, do they have like a list of things, do they have like, when they're working with developers, are there specific metrics they're looking to get to, or items on your checklist that they're going, trying to work with them to initiate, how they're looking at the environmental impacts of these developments and how they can mitigate some of them. So I know that's be a lot to put on like this current project spreadsheet, but I also remember that Alderman Arnett, he was asking, he says, there are things that we've been trying to do for a long time, and he sort of felt like it wasn't getting anywhere, and what more needs to happen so that these priorities get addressed in things like new development. And so I don't know, maybe one of our guests could be Eric. Maybe he could come and talk to us about how they approach that. Because it sounds like in this case, he was having those conversations with the developer. And I think for me, at least, I would love to hear from him, like, how do they approach that? So that we understand, what they're doing, what they'd like to be doing, what's reasonable to expect too, so that like somebody like me isn't going, why aren't you doing this huge big thing, right? Because this is their process, and so I can understand their process better.
Yeah. And a lot of what DPZ does during this development process is really comparing things to code. So when you're talking about Alderman Arnett talking about initiatives within development, it's a lot of it's about amending the code to be up to a higher standard, right? So at the last meeting, we heard Rob Savage talk a little bit about making a stricter forest conservation code. And so during this development process, you'll see it in this project sheet, FCA status. So kind of talk about where it is. Looks like some of these will actually have comments about square footage or talk about preliminary approval in X, Y, and Z. But there could be other things. There could be form-based code. There could be different things about EDVs and all sorts of different things to make sure that when the Z is reviewing the project, so that it's up to city standards, that they might be at a higher standard, if making sense. When it comes to providing sort of a subjective point of view as to how the project fits within the goals of the comprehensive plan, fits within the goals and the objectives of the Environmental Commission and different things. That's where things can become a little bit more hazy. At that point, things can often become more of I don't want to say quite a deal, but it's a little bit of give and take sometimes, right? And a lot of times it's hard to request things that are beyond the city code on the basis of economic investment. So it's always good to provide opinions and comments on these specific developments. And if you have any more specific questions about those developments for DPZ to provide a little bit more detail, then perhaps that detail can be provided. But in terms of kind of understanding, where the environmental checks and standards are, it's all right there in the city code. It's just kind of like knowing what it is that they're looking for when it comes for these developments. So it's kind of a high level explanation of how that all works. If that was at all confusing, I can try to explain it a little bit again.
It's a new area for me, so it was a good overview. Thank you.
Of course. Did you have any follow-up questions, or we're looking for any further clarity as to sort of what these projects are getting at, and what's typical for the approval process?
Well, I guess it's hard for me to see, and I'm sorry, Jeremy and Linda, please, if you have questions about this, why don't we go to you guys? Because I'm just trying to figure out how, if in our priorities we have, maybe making recommendations on these environmental options for new developments, then, but it's hard to know what's already been considered and what hasn't been considered by like looking at this sheet, right? So I don't know. It's hard for me to say, well, gosh, they could have done this, or maybe did they think about that, because I have no clue, like, looking at this sheet, which I'm very grateful to have. So thank you again. But Jeremy and Linda, any questions about any of these projects or thoughts overall about how we use this information in our work?
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about like we don't know everything that's already been considered or discussed, and that's what my understanding is in the past when the commission has weighed in on these things, either it's like maybe a higher profile thing where there is more context or information floating out there, or the commission's in the know about like that's how it was, I'd say, with like Crystal Spring back in the day, and then what is now right Providence Point. So I think we're a little more informed in some of those cases as a commission, and can weigh in a little more effectively with that knowledge of what has or hasn't been considered to that point. But when we're just operating from the list that we have, we don't have all that. So I think we just put information or suggestions in a letter to the planning commission if they're a little more aware than of what has been discussed, and can intelligently like then make a decision. Oh, we have considered that. Thank you, Environmental Commission, but not an issue. I think that's what we can do. But again, it's a matter of our priorities and like what's worth the time and effort. And for us, if it's just we're trying to get one more little bioretention or a tree or something, is that the priority for us versus the other things we might spend our time on?
Valid points. Thank you. Linda, and do you guys have questions about any of the specific projects?
Did Bill go away?
He did. He had to drop. Yes, he had to drop.
Yeah. Back to where we started before, I'd really like to know what the city's budget is, what their priorities are, and how we can support them. Instead of just going off on our own saying, well, we want this to happen and will you support us? So, yeah, and I don't know where we go from there. One of the things that did come up with Save Our Trees and a little bit in our community in Hunt Meadow is that high school kids get credit for their volunteer work. In fact, I think they're required to do so many hours a year. And so if we can make a connection with the high schools, or especially, well, I guess any of them in the city, middle schools and the high schools, and let them know there's a need for, well, we had people with Save Our Trees who were cutting ivy out of the trees. We had whole families there, mother, father, and 3 or 4 kids that were pulling ivy out of the trees. So I think that's more of our outreach to the communities and, like doing flyers, let people know what we're doing. Because I think a lot of people would like to be involved, know they're doing something that's worthwhile instead of, sitting around not doing anything. I don't know.
That's definitely something I'd love for us to see us doing. As far as like the planning and zoning sheet, I don't think my intention in what I said was not that they should do, that we're setting priorities for the city council. But it does make me wonder because you both have brought up aligning to the budget, yet we do our priorities before there's a new budget. So should we be changing the schedule on which we are doing these priorities? Because we do them on a calendar year, but the budget isn't running on a calendar year. So does it make sense to look at when we actually put together our priorities so they're not calendar year, they're fiscal year, and that would give us a better opportunity to align them to the budget if this group thinks that that's that's important. Because we've just spent several months developing priorities. Great. And then I would like to talk about the priorities that we've put in place.
Yeah,
Not knowing.
And some of them don't take a lot of money. Like for
Well, no, most of our things do not. We don't have a budget. We do not have a budget.
yeah, but I mean, with the
our stuff
city,
is no cost.
yeah, like the tree canopy. If we have volunteers, whether it's high school kids or, communities working to get the invasives out of our trees and then planting new trees, then that doesn't cost anything. Just, getting the word out and getting people excited about participating.
Yeah, so it's aligning. Yeah, it's getting the information out about the work that's already going on that different organizations are. Yeah. And so that's one of the things we want to figure out is how do we get the word out, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe that's what we'll dig into next month. Maybe Dylan, we can have had the media training by the next meeting and have kind of feel like we have a freer hand to decide what's the scope of what we can do. Would be helpful.
Yeah, and as far as the calendar and the priorities and everything goes, I don't know if we'll ever have ideal alignment. So for me, it's just the priorities, like the tree canopy and just maintenance, protection. That's really the focus. I think as far as the budget goes, is just making sure that the Forester budget is increasing or at least staying the same. And there's other line items that pertain to maintenance in particular. For example, I think that's a big part, covers a lot of our priorities as far as just the infrastructure and the tree canopy and everything else. Because we don't keep track. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I'm done.
Oh, sorry. At the Environmental Matters meeting, they did talk about the Stormwater Fund and they're projecting it out. I forget how many, 15 years or something, and the increases that were needed. And one of the things that Alderman Savage did bring up, which the consultant that's working on this projection is going to change, is that tree budget, the Forester budget, to make sure that it also increases. They had kept it flat. And so he wanted to make sure that it also, saw increases as needed too. So just something you said made me remember that conversation. So I think we should see that in the long-term budgeting, that will be, but something good to keep an eye on, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing I think we'd want to weigh in on, and we don't have to overthink it. We can just really key in on that one thing, make it really short as far as comments. It doesn't have to be a month-long, multi-month type discussion. It's just, we already know what our priorities are. We can just focus on one or two things in the budget.
So do you mean as one aspect of what we're doing, or as part of a larger thing that we're trying to accomplish? Because
writing a comment on the budget would just be really a pretty minor thing in our overall picture, I would think, but it's important and it's tangible.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So let's as we look at the budget stuff next month, see where they are with that. See if that's then we want to put a short letter together to support the continuation of the funding and increases as needed. And then if there are a few other items that we find, we could put it all into one letter.
Yeah, and we can just share things we learn. Whoever gets into the budget first, if whatever they see or share, find interesting, we can just communicate by email in the meantime.
Sounds good. Okay. So any questions about the planning and zoning updates and any particular developments anybody has questions about?
Not for me, but thanks again to Dylan and everyone else in the city for putting it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
All
it took a
right.
while to get over your way.
Okay, so Dylan, we got the current projects sheet from you guys. Anything that you want to highlight particularly? For this month?
Yeah, I think they gave a pretty decent overview of what's going on with the Pollinator Park. For our April highlights, I think a lot of it is kind of just going into how we've been working on certain procedural things and certain grants. I don't have it in front of me. I think we've been making some pretty good headway on things that we've been trying to get for a number of years in certain cases. We're continuing to work with our consultants, including our easements consultant at Macron, and just making sure that those things are getting over the line. You'll see in the April highlights, that we're in development, being awarded and working on several pretty important grants. So it's a very basic summary of kind of what's going on. But it's just kind of been a lot of back and forth and just making sure that boxes are being checked off before we can move forward. Despite the fact that we all know that federal funding has decreased substantially in the past 6 months. We're still seeing money flowing in to support a lot of different initiatives that, like I said, in recent years, things that have been talked about to happen. We've been really serious about finding ways in the funds to move those things forward. So that's just what we're doing.
Jeremy and Linda, any questions about the priorities or the their updates?
Nope.
Dylan, oh, sorry, was somebody going to say something?
I said no questions.
Okay. Dylan, thanks for sending out the information about the event on Friday. Are there a lot of people coming? A lot of organizations participating?
So we have a few organizations that will be showing up. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to name them off, but I suppose we have a few organizations that are saying that it's very likely that they'll be there, and we have a number that have confirmed that they will be present. These are all just local partners that we've worked with before, and that we're happy to promote sort of what they're doing in the area. We will have Annapolis Department of Transportation there to talk about some of their initiatives and to spread some outreach about how residents can choose more sustainable transit options or transportation options. And we'll be there, of course, to talk about sort of what we're doing and inspire residents to choose more sustainable day-to-day options as a resident. So it's not the largest space in the world. We're just using market space and taking up a few of the parking spaces right along I guess what you could call the lounge area of the market house area. So we'll have tables, we'll have games, we'll have events and different things like that. And it'll be going on during the sailboat show, the first day of the sailboat show. So we anticipate there will be a substantial amount of foot traffic. Yeah, it's all looking pretty good. We've got promotional materials, we've got partners, like I've said. And so I think it'll be successful. Yeah, if anyone wants to get involved, feel free to to raise your hand. I'm sure there's ways that we can fit you in, and increase our outreach, and you can get people more in tune as to what's going on with the AEC.
Yeah, I wasn't sure like what we would do if we kind of raised our hand and signed up. So are people like having like booths and tables and things like that? Is that what they're doing?
Yeah, people are doing tables. They're bringing their their promotional materials. Just sort of talking about what they do as an organization, and just trying to connect people with the cause. People who feel called to answer the call for Earth Week / Earth Day. And so that's really just the general idea of engaging our local environmental partners.
So are you and Jackie going to be down there? Will you have like a table or something that you'll be staffing?
I don't believe Jackie will be present, but yes, I'll be present with the city table, and we'll have outreach materials and sort of just talking about how residents can get involved in several different ways. And one of those ways would be through the Environmental Commission. But it's of course not the only message that we'll have.
Right. So I'm going to try to come down and wander around, but would love to come stand at the table for a while with you since we don't have a table. Would that work?
No, more the merrier. Yeah, I'd love to have you over.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Assuming I can find parking. So
yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
You might have to go to the Navy Stadium and shuttle in.
Oh, that's true. That's always an option. Yes. I could ride my bike, I guess. That's always another option.
That would be a really, really good promotion.
Yeah. Okay. So just the last thing on the agenda, member updates and future. I think we have plenty of future agenda ideas right now. So any updates, Jeremy or Linda?
None. Oh, I'm thinking I'll be at the event Bill mentioned on Saturday, in Robinwood, and I think I also just want to mention, it sounds like the Resilience Authority and everything is going well in the whole watershed fund, and for the Severn, Randy mentioned that earlier, but yeah, I don't have much to say from what I've received, other than it's going forward. So, and at least some of those programs survived drastic state cuts, or as drastic as they could have been cuts. So at least there is state monies available.
That is good news.
As long as it is. And I am leaving, well, I'm going to be gone all day tomorrow, and then I'm leaving Friday, like at 3 o'clock in the morning for Costa Rica for 8 days. So I will not be at the meetings or at Robinwood to help.
Did you say how many days?
What's that?
How long?
For well, Friday through Friday. So I'll be back Saturday, the 3rd, May 3rd.
Gotcha.
Well,
That
have
sounds
a
awesome.
wonderful
Yeah, have
time.
fun.
Yeah, have fun.
I will be studying the environment while I'm there.
Yes, that's
Oh,
the
sure.
Yes.
purpose of your visit.
Lots of biodiversity there, I understand.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay. All right. So hopefully next meeting we'll have a quorum. Thank you all for your time tonight. Dylan, you had said you think we're good for our May meeting in person in the conference room at City Hall, correct?
Yeah, that is effectively confirmed. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I'll let you know if that changes, but you know, I can say with pretty strong confidence that that room is available for you.
Okay, so that's wonderful. Get to see everybody in person. And then,
Sorry to cut you off, but just as an FYI, I did send over that green at the bus stops letter to the council members and to the mayor.
yes, I wanted to ask you about that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, great. And then the other thing was just that media training thing, whatever we have to do with the PIO so we can start to figure out how we can, do this kind of digital outreach would be
Yeah,
great.
it's a bit novel, so I think it's still being worked out a little bit. But I will ping them again and see how we can get that over.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Of course.
All right. We don't have a quorum, so we don't have to vote. We'll just say good night and see you in May.